Hi, I'm Jenny. Welcome to Designs with Paper. On today's card project, I will be using a layering stamp. It's a super easy way to make a really fabulous statement on a card. Thanks for stopping by. Today I am stamping with Altenew's Tulip stamp set. This is one of their layering stamp sets, and it really is awesome. They have some really nice layering stamp sets. I have a piece of Neenah Solar White 80-pound cut down to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and I've put it inside my MISTI stamp positioner, and I'm stamping the outline and all of the layers of the images today. Now you have the option with these stamps to use the outline and then color it in with your coloring medium, or to use the outline and the layers with colored inks, or to just use the layering without the outline, and you have such a wide variety of looks. This stamp set has 4 or 5 different stems and 3 different flower heads, so there's a ton of different things you can do. I knew that I wanted 3 tulips on the front of this card, kind of all over to the right side a little bit, to leave a little room for a small sentiment on the left. I didn't plan things out very well, so you'll see that I'm kind of fidgeting around with placement and which stems I'm going to use and where they're all going to go. And I will have to do a little bit of masking to make sure that those stems slide behind each other. And I just used a little piece of a Post-it tape to mask off the edge of that leaf. And that Post-it tape, or that Post-it piece, is going to come back and all over the place on this card by the time it's all done. Now, the one thing I didn't do was remember to take pictures of this card before I stuck it in the mail to send it to my sister-in-law for her anniversary. My sister-in-law and her husband, and my husband and I, and my husband's parents all have anniversaries in like a week. Every once in a while, they all land on the same weekend. It's kind of crazy. So here you'll see I'm going to stamp those outlines of those flower heads on there, and part of them is going to be covered up by that piece of Post-it, which I wasn't even thinking. I should have pulled it off, and then I'll clean up the stamps, take the Post-it off, and then go, oh wait, I got to put those back on. The cool thing about these photopolymer stamps is that you can see right through them. So you can see my head sticking in the shot there a little bit. I just leaned right over it and looked straight through the stamp and lined up the lines, and you can't even tell. That's the great thing about clear stamps, and the great thing about a MISTI is that you can fix that kind of oopsie so easy. Now, for me, it doesn't work as well with sentiments, but for these line stamps, it works awesome. And you would never know that I had forgotten to move that silly little Post-it piece out of the way. Now, once I get these flowers all stamped and cleaned off, I'm going to look. In this stamp set, they have a number of little of sentiments of varying sizes, and they have one that's love. And so I pulled that off the stamp backing and placed it on my card front, and then I lined it up, kind of fidgeted with it and lined it up with the grids on my MISTI. And I couldn't see the grid lines very well against my desktop, so I put the stamp package back there, and that white underneath the MISTI lid helped the grid lines show up a little bit better. And I'm just putting a little bit of pressure with my finger in that rag so that it will slide really nice and smooth across the MISTI lid. Now, I knew that for this stamp that I wanted the stems to all be the same greens. So I'm using 2 colors of Altenew ink. I used the Frayed Leaf and the Evergreen. And the Frayed Leaf is a lighter green, and that's the more filled in color. And I used the Evergreen as the detail color. And this first time I stamped it down, I didn't stamp up the stamp very well. There was a hair or something in it. So I had to stamp it again. And again, another awesome thing about the MISTI is I don't have to worry about not lining it up correctly. I just put some more ink on that stamp and a little bit of pressure with my finger, and perfect. Altenew inks are really nice. The colors don't fade back too much, so once they're dry, they really do look like the same color as when they're wet. And also with these Altenew stamps, if the newer stamp sets have a layering guide that comes with them. When I bought this one, they didn't have that, but they do have a layering guide on their website. So off to my left-hand side there, I have my phone open to their website so I can tell which pieces are the layers for each stem and each flower head. And it's really handy to be able to just have that. And you could print it out and stick it in the back of your stamp set if you wanted to. I think these layering stamps are kind of like one of my favorite new things in stamping in the last few years. I've been stamping for a long time, probably nearly 10 years, and these layering stamps have come out in the last, I don't know, they've become really popular in probably the last 6 or 7, and they really do add a whole nother dimension to your stamping. You know, you get that colored look in a fraction of the time that it takes to pull out your color mediums and color these images. And they just look awesome. Now I knew that I wanted to do a yellow and a purple tulip. Yellow and purple are my absolute favorite tulips. Last year for my birthday, my mom ordered me some tulip bulbs, and they were delivered last fall when it was the perfect time to plant them where I live here in Virginia. However, when they got here, we had a heat spell. Like, we had astronomically hot weather. It was over 100 degrees for almost a week, and I was afraid that the tulip bulbs would start to sprout. So I stuck this box of bulbs in my fridge so that they wouldn't start to grow. Well, I forgot about them. And I forgot about them until March, when it was time for them to start blooming. And I couldn't figure out why my fridge was so dang full and nothing would fit. And I remembered those tulip bulbs were in there. So I pulled out this box of tulip bulbs and planted them in March, which thankfully we had a cold spell at the same time. We had some really unseasonably lows at that time. So it was kind of perfect timing. And I'm crossing my fingers that they will come back next spring. For this first yellow tulip, I used 2 Altenew inks. I think they were Warm Sunshine and Caramel Toffee. And I stamped that light color one twice. I wanted a little darker. And I pulled that mask off, and it was lined up really well. And then I stamped the detail one, the detail layer, in that darker Caramel Toffee, I think is what it's called. And I had to move that mask and stamp it again afterwards to make sure that all of the lines, all of the detail showed up. And I'll move that mask around to stamp the other 2 flowers as well. That little Post-it paper, it got to the point where it didn't want to stick to the card front anymore. I had moved it so many times it wasn't sticky anymore. So I put my stamp down and closed my MISTI, and the stamp came back and the Post-it paper came back, and it was all just silliness. But whatever, we got it done. So it looks all beautiful now. For the purple tulip, I used a couple of Stampin' Up inks. And I don't have any little cubes of Stampin' Up. I don't know if they make little cubes of Stampin' Up. So it's a little bit, you have to be a little bit more patient with the bigger pads on this MISTI, but it works. And I picked a light purple and a dark purple, and I Perfect Plum, I think, is the light purple, and I stamped it, and I had a little bit of a heart attack because it was a lot darker going on than I thought it was going to be. But I really wanted that super dark purple. I think the tulip color is called like Midnight Purple, and I really wanted that dark purple. So gratefully, I had this other purple called Blackberry Bliss, and it is a dark purple, and it turned out exactly how I wanted it. And so while I was trying to get all this purple ink off my MISTI lid and my stamp, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with that third tulip. Did I want to use the same yellows, different purple? And I decided to go with yellows, but use some different inks. So I pulled some Stampin' Up inks out, and I think it was like Crushed Curry and Daffodil Delight or something like that. And the light colored one, I didn't really like. It just was kind of too light, and it wasn't different enough. So then I used my darker ink there as the base ink, and that was really dark. And so then I had to use an orange for the detail color, and it didn't really turn out how I planned, but whatever. That seems to be the process of card making. You have a plan, and then you have what comes out at the end. So I decided to trim this down to 4 by 5 1/4, and I pulled out a piece of Blackberry Bliss cardstock and cut it in half, so it was 4 1/4 by 11. My kids call that hot dog style. And I scored it at 5 1/2 with my bone folder and scoreboard. And then I decided that I wanted to use a piece of vellum between my card base and my tulip panel. And I have this, so I cut this card panel down again, and I ended up cutting it down to 3 3/4 by 5 inches. So it was, smaller, a lot smaller than when I started, because I wanted this vellum that I have to make kind of a textured layer in between the tulips and the card base. And I have this embossed colored vellum that I got from Stampin' Up! This last spring during their, what's it called? Like Celebration, I think is what it's called, or Celebration or something. So I cut this vellum down to 4 by 5 1/4. So it was just a little smaller than the card base. And I used that really light green, which is very similar in color to the light green in the tulip stems. And I just adhered that to the card base with my ATG gun. Didn't matter because you're not going to see it. And I put that adhesive in the middle because I wanted the edges to float just a little bit. And then I pulled out my big, huge roll of 3M foam tape that I got off Amazon. And that thing, when it comes, really is as big as your head. It is a huge roll of foam tape, and it lasts forever. I looked on my Amazon history, and I think I bought it almost 2 years ago. It lasts forever. So there I have the panel put down, and you can see the vellum poke out a little bit, and then there's just a small border. And because it has a dark card base, I put a piece of printer paper on the inside so that I would have a place to write my message. So there we go. A nice, pretty tulip anniversary card.